A while back, I sat down and actually added up what I was paying every month for automations. Not the big obvious tools, the little ones. The drag and drop service that quietly shuffled data between my apps, the one that sorted my incoming mail, the one that tagged things and moved them around. Individually, they were cheap. Together, they were a real bill, every single month, forever. And worse than the money, the whole thing had become a fragile web. Dozens of little automations, each living inside someone else's website, each able to break in a way I could not see or fix. So I made a decision. I was going to move the important ones off that hosted service and onto small scripts and a local AI model running on my own machine. It went better than I expected, but it absolutely was not free or painless, and I want to give you the honest version, the wins and the parts where the old way was actually better. Why no code is genuinely great to start? First, let me be fair to where I started, because I do not want this to sound like no code is bad. It is not. Those drag and drop automation tools are genuinely brilliant for getting going. You connect two apps by clicking, you draw an arrow between a trigger and an action, and a thing that used to need a programmer just works in about 10 minutes with zero code. For simple jobs, when this happens, do that. They are close to perfect, and I still happily recommend them to anyone starting out. I built my entire early setup on one of these tools, and it carried me a long way. So if you are just wiring two apps together so a new signup drops a row into a sheet, honestly, stop watching and go use one of those. It is the right tool. This video is not about those simple cases. It is about what happens when you outgrow them, which, if you keep building, you eventually will. And I want to be really clear that outgrowing a tool is not the tool failing you. It is you succeeding. The drag and drop service did exactly what it was supposed to. It let me start before I knew what I was doing. It taught me what these automations should even look like. And it carried real weight for over a year. By the time I moved on, I knew exactly what I needed, because that tool had shown me. You almost never start with the thing I am about to describe. You start simple, you learn what you actually want, and only then does moving to something more custom even make sense. Doing it the other way around, building the complicated version first, is how people waste months on a setup nobody needed. Where it started to hurt. So where did it start to hurt? Three places, and they crept up slowly. The first was cost. These tools usually charge by how many tasks you run, and as my little automations multiplied and ran more often, the bill climbed in a way that had nothing to do with how much value any single one added. The second was the ceiling. The moment I wanted to do something even slightly clever, something the visual editor did not have a neat little box for, I hit a wall. I would spend an hour fighting the interface to do a thing that would have been 3 lines if I could just write it directly. And the third, the one that really got to me, was the black box. When one of these automations broke, and they do break, I was poking at someone else's system through a tiny window, guessing. I could not really see inside, I could not properly test it, and I could not fix the root cause. I could only fiddle and hope. For the simple stuff that trade-off is fine, for the things my work actually depended on, it stopped feeling fine at all. And the three problems fed each other in a nasty way. Because I could not see inside, I could not really fix things, so I would build clumsy workarounds, and those workarounds ran more tasks, which pushed the bill higher, and the higher bill made me resent a thing I could not even properly control. It became this little knot of frustration that I kept paying for every month. The moment I noticed I was actively annoyed every time I opened the tool, I knew it had stopped being the right fit for these particular jobs, even though it was still perfect for the simple ones sitting right next to them. The new shape, a script as the spine. So here is the shape I moved to, and it is simpler than it sounds. For each automation that mattered, I replaced the whole chain of drag and drop boxes with one small script. The script is just the spine. It does the plain mechanical steps in order. Fetch this, check that, put the result over there. All the boring glue that the visual tool was doing, a script does too, except now it is a few lines I can read top to bottom, test on my own machine, and actually understand. And crucially, it lives on my computer, in a file I own, not inside a web app I rent. If it breaks, I open it up and I can see exactly what happened, because the whole thing is right there in front of me. That alone, just being able to see and fix my own automations, took an enormous amount of low-level stress off my shoulders. But a plain script can only do rigid, predictable steps, and a lot of my automations needed something the script alone could not do. where the local AI slots infants. Because here is the thing. Most of my automations had one step in the middle that was not mechanical at all. It needed a judgment call. Is this incoming email actually important, or is it noise? What category does this message belong in? Is the tone of this note friendly or upset? Those fuzzy, human-flavored decisions are exactly what a rigid script is terrible at, and exactly what a language model is good at. So the new design is, the script handles the predictable plumbing, and at the one spot where a real judgment is needed, it hands the question to an AI model and gets back a clean answer. The script asks, here is an email, is it important, yes or no? And the model decides. Then the script takes that answer and carries on with its mechanical work. That split is the whole idea. Boring deterministic steps in code, the one fuzzy decision handed to a model, and the model only touches the part that genuinely needs it. This split is worth sitting with, because it is the thing the old visual tool could never do well. Those drag and drop tools are wonderful at the mechanical plumbing and genuinely awful at judgment. They offer you rule boxes. If the subject contains this word, if the sender is that address, and you end up trying to fake human judgment out of a stack of rigid little conditions that never quite captures it. By handing the judgment to a model instead, I stop trying to spell out every case in advance. I just describe what I am trying to decide, and the model reads the actual thing and uses sense. The script stays simple and predictable. The model carries the part that needs real reading, and neither one is asked to do the job it is bad at. Why local and not the cloud? Now, that AI model could live in the cloud, behind an API pay per call for. For plenty of people that is the right choice, and there is nothing wrong with it. But for these particular jobs I chose to run a smaller model locally, on the same machine where the scripts already live, and I did it for 3 reasons. One is cost. These automations run constantly, around the clock, and a model running on hardware I already own adds nothing to my monthly bill, where paying per call for that volume would add up fast. 2 is privacy. A lot of what these automations touch is my own mail and my own data, and I would simply rather it never leave my house at all. 3 is control. The local model does not change underneath me, it does not have an outage on someone else's schedule, and it keeps working even when my internet does not. The trade-off is real, and I will be straight about it. A model small enough to run on my machine is not as sharp as the biggest cloud models. But for the narrow, specific judgment calls I am asking of it, is this important? What bucket does this go in? It is more than good enough, and the independence is worth it to me. Let me walk through one real migrations. Let me make this concrete with one automation I actually moved. I had a no-code flow that watched my inbox, tried to figure out which messages were genuinely worth my attention, and sorted the rest into folders. In the old tool, this was a tangle of rule boxes that I was forever tweaking, and it still got things wrong constantly because rigid rules just cannot judge importance. The new version is a small script that checks for new mail, and for each message it asks the local model one simple question. Given what this is about, does this need me today? The model reads the actual content and makes a sensible call, the way a rule never could. The script files everything based on that answer. It took me an afternoon to build and test. It cost me nothing to run, and it is noticeably better at the judgment than the pile of brittle rules ever was, because the hard part, deciding what matters, is finally being done by something that can actually weigh meaning instead of just matching keywords. And the part one did not expect to enjoy so much is how easy it is to change now. When I want to adjust what counts as important, I do not go hunting through a maze of rule boxes in a web app. I edit one plain sentence in the prompt, the one that tells the model what I care about today, and the behavior shifts. That flexibility, being able to retune the judgment by just describing it differently, would have taken a dozen fiddly rule edits in the old tool, and half of them would have had side effects I would not notice for a week. What got better and what got worse? So let me be even-handed about how it actually turned out, because it was not all upside. What got better, clearly, was cost. Those recurring bills are just gone. Control, I can see and fix everything now. And capability, the AI steps do things no visual rule could. But I am not going to pretend nothing got worse. The obvious cost is that this needs a little real coding, where the drag and drop tool needed none, so it is genuinely not for everyone, and I would never tell you otherwise. It also means I am now the support team. When something breaks at an awkward hour, there is no company to escalate to. It is just me and the file. And I had to set things up so these scripts run reliably on their own, on a schedule, which the hosted tool simply handled for me. So I traded a monthly bill and a black box for more control and more responsibility. For me, on the automations that matter, that trade was clearly worth it. For a lot of people, it honestly would not be, and that is a perfectly sensible place to land. Firma formsönedvand, misa femin vankam, ada denilins. So should you tear out your no-code tools and do this? For most of them, probably not. And I mean that. If an automation is simple, if it rarely breaks, and if the cost is not bothering you, then leave it exactly where it is, because moving it would just be making work for yourself. The ones worth migrating are the specific few that have gotten expensive, that keep hitting the ceiling of what the visual tool allows, or that need a real judgment call the rules cannot make. Those are the ones where a small script plus a local model genuinely shines. And you do not have to do it all at once. I moved one automation, the most painful one, lived with it for a couple of weeks to make sure it was solid, and only then moved the next. Start with your single most annoying, most expensive automations, rebuild just that one this way, and see how it feels before you touch anything else. That is the whole migration, from a monthly bill and a fragile web of someone else's boxes to a handful of small scripts and a local model that are entirely mine. I am going to keep showing the real systems I run, the trade-offs included, and nothing oversold. If that is your kind of thing, subscribe and follow along, because there is a lot more coming. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.